In this video, I'm going to take you through 6 steps to take you from zero to hero in sports cards. And what you're about to learn, you're about to piggyback off of my 10 years of buying and selling sports cards full time. I've sold millions of dollars in sports cards, and I've boiled it down 6 steps taking you from zero to hero. And let's get right into it. So, if you've never bought a sports card before, I think this is something important you should know. 1, how these cards come into existence. All right. So, if we head to eBay, this might be obvious to some, but it may not be obvious to others, right? If we just look here and we type in like Prism Hobby, so this is a box of cards. Every card you see on this planet, whether it's $1 million it's worth or it's worth $1, somebody pulled that card from a box or a case or a pack that looks something like this, okay? And there's all sorts of different products for different sports, different packs and boxes, etc. Right? There's a lot going on, but just to show you an example, like this is a card actually just got a counter offer on. This card's worth probably $800. Someone got lucky and pulled this from a box of cards, okay? So it's important you know that, all right? So every card comes from a box, pack, case, etc. Now, there's something people do called breaking, and this is kind of the cornerstone or the backbone of the hobby, you could call it. So, breaking. What is it? All right. So, a lot of these packs and boxes of cards are expensive. All right. So, let's say I'm not a good drawer here, but let's say we have a box of cards and this is worth $1,000. That's how much this box of cards is worth. And that might sound crazy to some, but I promise you there's boxes and cases out there that sell for $5, $10, $20, $50, $100,000. It's really not that expensive. However, it is not that easy to find one person that's just going to fork over $1,000 to take a swing at pulling some expensive cards from a box or case. And just so you know, opening up boxes and cases is a losing proposition. It's a losing game. It's a bad gamble, and you're probably going to lose money in the long run. However, what breaking is, someone will take $1,000 box and say, okay, well, I'm not going to sell this to one person. I'm going to sell this to 10 people, okay, at $100 per. So what happens is a breaker buys this box or case for a discount, like call it $700 or $800. They sell it for $1,000, but they sell it through the form of 10 people at $100 a spot. So 10 different people send the breaker $100, right? And then that breaker gets $1,000, and then these 10 people divvy up the box in some sort of way. There's a bunch of different ways to divvy up boxes and cases. You could divvy it up by division. You could just round robin each card that comes out. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, but this is breaking fundamentally. Now, I do not recommend doing this, and if you've ever watched my videos before, you'll probably hear me recommend to not do this because this is a losing proposition. Doing it once in a while, sure, it's fun, it's entertainment. Hey, I love the sports gamble, so I'm not against gambling, but I'm here to help people make money, and this is not a way to make money. And there's a very popular website called Whatnot, okay? And this is where a lot of breaking of boxes and cases goes down. And honestly, a lot of people that join our program, what ends up happening is they get into Whatnot first, and they go on the website, they make an account, they start opening up packs and cases, and they lose $5, $10, $15, $20,000, and they see one of my ads, and then they're like, oh, you can make money with this thing? And then they learn how to make money with sports cards. So this is how cards come into existence, okay? Now, piggybacking off of that, getting into the kind of the meat and potatoes here, how do we actually make money in sports cards, okay? So that is through grading. So piggybacking off of people opening up boxes and cases, these cards, some of them are in good condition, some of them are not in good condition, okay? And what you can do is something called grading. So fundamentally, what you could do, and this is going to sound crazy, but I promise you it's true, you can buy a card for, let's say, $100, okay? It's going to cost you about $20 to get a card graded. Let's call that the grading cost. And if this card grades a 10, and the main company that grades cards is called PSA, a PSA 10 could be worth $300. This is fundamentally how grading sports cards works. You could buy a card for cheap, get it graded, it could be worth a lot more. Now, there's obviously a little bit more that goes into it. knowing what cards to buy, when to buy, which I'm going to go over here in a second. But this is grading. And just to show you what this actually looks like, if we go to eBay here, and let's just look up a random card. Let's call it CJ Stroud. So a Stroud Silver Prism. This is just a random card that for some reason I thought of first. And if we go to filter on eBay, and we go to sold items, let's take a quick look here. And we could see that, so check this out, right? So this card of CJ Stroud that you're looking at on my screen right now is worth about $135. That's what this card sold for, not graded. You would clearly see it's not graded. And if we just go down a little bit to this card, this is actually the same exact card graded a 10. You could see it's in that case. It's graded a 10. And you could look, it sold for $390, right? That's not bad. Buy it for $130, get it graded, sell it for $390. So that is fundamentally how to make predictable and consistent money in sports cards. There's a few other ways to make money in sports cards that I'll go over in a second, but that is grading in a nutshell. Okay? Now, you might be asking yourself, okay, well, that sounds great, right? That sounds too easy. Honestly, that sounds too good to be true. You could just buy a card and get it graded and it's worth double or triple. Yeah, you could do it. But number 3 here is what it takes to get a 10. All right. So this is important. Now, there's 4 pieces of criteria you need to look for when sending a card in for grading, okay? We have the corners of the card, okay? And then we have the edges of the card. And then we have the centering of the card, and then we have the surface of the card. So these are the 4 main pieces of criteria that you should look for when sending a card in for grading. I'm not going to go over each one because that's a whole nother video in itself. I have a bunch of videos going over that stuff, but this is what you want to look for. And once you get good at this game of looking at a card and being able to evaluate the condition, you can do pretty good. And just to kind of break down the math, right, kind of like going back up here, right, so if you're decent and you follow at least what I say or what I teach, and I can speak for my students in my program, about 70% of the cards you send in will grade a 10, okay? So what that looks like in terms of math, because you guys are probably watching this because you want to make more money, right, is if you, right, let's go back to this CJ Stroud example, right? So this card, I'm just curious. I want to look up what a 9 is worth just to give you guys actual data. So a 9 sells for like 110, 120. Okay. So, right, you could buy this card, of CJ Stroud, and it's worth about 120. Okay. And then your grading cost to get it graded, grading cost is about $20, give or take. And now there's 2 things that are going to happen, right? This card is either going to grade a PSA 9 or a PSA 10, all right? And now, if this card grades a PSA 9 based off the math I just saw, after your grading cost, you're going to lose about $30 to $40 if it grades a 9. However, if this card grades a 10, you'll make about, you'll profit roughly $200, right? And if you follow what I'm saying here, right, going back up here, you can have this happen 70% of the time and this happen 30% of the time. That's a good game, right? Hopefully anyone watching this would make that gamble. If 30% of the time you could lose $40 and 70% of the time you could make $200, would you do that? Of course you would. If you wouldn't, then you get off this video because you don't make any sense and I don't want you watching this, all right? So this is how grading works and the math behind it, all right? Now, taking it one step further, okay, number 4 here, timing. This is a big deal. And this may not seem like a big deal. This is a very big deal, what I'm about to talk about, okay? So, timing the sports card market is huge, okay? You need to be able to do this to make consistent money, all right? And let me explain. So we have four main sports, right? Or three main sports, excuse me. We have baseball, and then we have football, and then we have basketball, all right? So let me paint a little picture for you. So if you buy a card, it's going to take, let's say, 1 to 2 months for it to get graded, right? So you're going to buy an asset, you're going to send it off to get graded, and now you have to wait, right? And hopefully you keep buying more cards to fill up your pipeline, so a month or two down the line, you have cards coming back to you every single month. But if you're going to buy an asset and send it off for grading, you want to buy something that has a high likelihood of being worth more when you get it back than less, right? You don't want to buy that CJ Stroud card I just showed you for $120, and when you get it back, it's only worth 90, right? Because you're putting yourself in a bad position. You want to get that card back, and hopefully it's worth 140, 150. So not only are you making money from the card grading at 10, hopefully, but you're also making money from the card appreciating, okay? So there's a timing element to sports cards. Let me explain. So with baseball, all right, the best time to buy baseball generally is you want to be buying baseball from about November to December. And I'm going to explain why here in a second. And you want to be selling baseball in about February to March, all right, roughly. This is rough. Now, football, you want to be buying football from about February to call it May, roughly. And you want to sell football in July to about August. And then basketball, you want to buy basketball in about June to July. And you want to sell basketball in about September to October. So you could see there's a nice rhythm to this, right? You buy baseball in November, December, and then you sell the baseball in February, March, and then you take that money and then you buy football from February to May, and then you sell it from July to August, then you take that money, then you buy basketball, and you buy it from June to July, then you sell it in September to October. Once you get that money, then you go back to baseball over here, and then you repeat the same cycle, okay? This is good. Now, what you want to do in sports cards, let me explain to you something. Most people, and I'm going to explain to you why all this timing works the way it does. So most prospects, most people in sports cards, most athletes, do not live up to expectation. It's just how sports works. Most people don't. And, scouts who have billions of dollars at their disposal can't even get it right. So how could you, right? And just to give you an amazing statistic, so last time I looked, 50%, half the NFL quarterbacks that are drafted in the first round are out of the league within 5 years. Crazy stat, right? So you want to take that risk element out of it. You want to take the element of a player playing out of it, because most guys are not going to play up to what people think, and then their hype's going to die, which means their value dies, and then you're going to lose money. So if you notice, right here with baseball, well, in November and December, what's happening with baseball, right? No one's playing. It's the offseason. And then we're selling it leading up to the season, right? Because leading up to the season, there's hype, there's momentum, and these guys appreciate in value. Same thing in football, right? What's happening in February to May? Well, nobody's playing, right? It's the offseason. And, things happen in the offseason to build the players' hype and value. Like, just to give you an example, I remember like 2 or 3 years ago when the Dolphins traded for Tyreek Hill, Tua Tagovailoa's value skyrocketed. Last year, with Kyler Murray, when the Cardinals drafted Marvin Harrison Jr., his value doubled. So things happen in the offseason that are positive for a player. And then you sell it leading up to the season, and you sell it to collectors and people that think Kyler Murray's going to have a great season, or Jalen Hurts, or whoever, right? And a lot of times you could buy these cards in February, May, sell it in July and August, get these cards graded in that period, and not only are you making money from the card grading at 10, but it's appreciating 20 to 30% in value. Not every time, obviously, but you're putting yourself in a good position. And same thing with basketball, right? June and July, right? You buy, it's the off season, and then you sell leading up to the season in September to October. Basketball, there's not as much time in the off season. This is super key. This is super important. if you do this wrong, you're not going to make any money. So like you could do everything right, but players shoot down in value. Let me just show you an example and just highlight what I'm talking about. So like, let's take okay, this card's right here, so this will work. All right, Victor Wembanyama, right? He's having a pretty good season. And look what happens with Victor Wembanyama. Well, this is before the season, right? This Silver Prism PSA 10 is worth like $900-ish. And look what happens when the season starts. Whoop. This card shoots down in value, and now this card came up a little bit, but this card's down like 15, 20%, and this happens all the time. And Wembanyama is having a good season. He's having a pretty good season, and his value is just worth way less. And to show you an extreme example here, like, I mean, let's show you an extreme example. So, like, Anthony Richardson, Silver Prism. Check this out. So we have Anthony Richardson's Silver Prism. And before the season, right, people were like, hey, he's a good player. He showed some potential last year, right? So this is before the season. This card is worth like $500. And he did not play how people thought. And bink, you could see people were like, uh-oh, wait, he's not as good as we thought. Wait, he's really inaccurate. And now this card is worth way less. Like, that's a crazy drop off from $500 here. Now it's worth like $100, right? And this is what happens all the time. Bryce Young, Will Levis, right? Think about all the young NFL quarterbacks, just all the young guys who are hyped. Just think back to it. Most of them don't perform up to expectation. It's just how it goes. So that's why this timing is super important, because if you bought this card of Anthony Richardson here and you got it graded and it came back to you here, it doesn't matter what you did. Even if the card graded a 15, you're going to lose money, right? Because it's worth way less, and this happens all the time. So you have to get that timing aspect right. Hopefully, I drove that point home. All right, next. So scaling, right? So like, okay, scaling. So you know how to grade sports cards now. You're timing the market consistently, and you can make a realistic, like, you could get it all the way up to $10,000 a month. At least like the students I teach, I'd say the average is like $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 a month. But how do you take it from like $3,000 to $4,000 to $5,000 a month to like 10, 15, 20, 30 grand a month, like real money where you could like possibly quit your job, right? So 2 ways to do that. Number one, so the first way is, so we use something called a card finder. So what a card finder is an overseas assistant that costs roughly $3 an hour. And what this overseas assistant does is they actually go on eBay and find cards for you. So it takes a lot of your time out of it. And you can hire multiple of these people. And, this is how you scale. You need employees, right? Like a Major League Profits, when we grew to a certain point, we had to hire salespeople and coaches because I cannot simply do everything. This is just another version of that. And because finding cards could be time consuming, like to get to $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month in profit by grading cards, I would say you need to be on eBay and looking at cards for like 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, right? And it's just impossible to look at everything, right? There's just thousands and thousands of cards uploaded every single day, and there's millions of cards on there to begin with. So it's impossible to do it yourself. But if you could leverage your time and hire it out for $3 an hour and train someone to do it, or multiple people, that's high leverage on your time. So actually for less time, you're making more money. You could have 3 of these people, you're paying them, total of $3 an hour each, and they could work for you for 4 hours a day each, right? So if you do that math, right, let's just do quick math here, right? You have 3 card finders times $3 an hour times, let's say, 4 hours a day, right? That's 3 times 3, 9 times 4. That's $36 per day to get 3 people searching for you for 4 hours a day, sending you boatloads of cards. All right, and you just need to look it over at the end of the day. So that's one way to scale. The next way to scale, so like continuing with this scaling trend here, is doing something called short-term investing. This is just a made-up term that I kind of made up, honestly, myself. So what short-term investing is, so finding raw cards and buying them to get them graded, there's a cap to it, right? Like 10, 15 grand a month profit. I haven't really seen much over that consistently. So like if you have, let's pretend 50 grand in the bank, it's like, okay, that's kind of hard to spend on all of these raw cards. How do you put that money into cards still and still make money? So you do something called short-term investing. So going back to here, the timing aspect that I was talking about, you could take these same principles of timing and just buy high-end graded cards. So all this is, for example, is you're buying higher end cards graded PSA 10 already. That's all this is. And since the card's already graded, your margins are going to be smaller. However, you could spend really unlimited amounts of money doing this. Like you could find cards for $2, $3, $5, $10, $20, $50,000. And just for example, a card that I have, so I bought this in November. It was a baseball card. It was a 2022 Bowman Chrome Jackson Cheerio Orange Refractor PSA 10. Because, I have the budget to do so, I spent $10,000 on the card, and I'm going to sell it very soon, and I'll be able to sell it for like $13,000-ish, so I'm making 30% of my money in a few months. You're not making the same profits you are grading, but since you're spending more money, you're still making a considerable amount of money, okay? So that's kind of the two ways to scale. Short-term investing, buying cards already graded, expensive ones in the offseason, and just selling them leading up to the season. And then also having a card finder. So these are like two ways to scale. And then lastly, this is like a scaling method / just high leverage on your time depending on the type of person you are. So, and this is one of my favorites. So number 6 is going to card shows. Going to live card shows is an amazing way to make money. And I'm not going to go too far in depth on this, but there's 2 types of card shows, right? Let me break this down. So we have 2 types of card shows. We have small ones, and then we have big ones, right? Big card shows, examples of card shows are like the Dallas Sports Spectacular, or the Chicago Sports Spectacular, the Dallas Card Show, the Burbank Card Show. I think there's one called like Midway of the West or Midwest or something like that. Anyways, I classify a big card show as anything with 300 tables or more. All right. So those are big card shows. Small card shows, these are like your local, card shows. And if you ever want to find card shows, what you could do is if you go to, so if we go to Google here and we type in sports card show calendar, you could see, this is the one I use. So Sports Card Investor, it's like a software. But anyways, this calendar will show you exactly where their sports card shows. And you could just filter by location or whatever you'd like. And a lot of times you can find local shows or big shows. And the way I like to do card shows, so bigger shows, right? Bigger shows, the problem with these is that the people going there are bigger dealers, right? So to go to these shows, right, it's expensive to set up, right? You have to travel, usually. And if people are doing these things, the dealers probably know what they're doing, and they're probably out there to make a considerable amount of money. So doing deals with these dealers is a little bit more difficult because they're just trying to squeeze every dollar out of you, which is fine. Like, they're dealers. Like, they should. Like, that's how they make money. I don't hate on them. However, at bigger shows, what I like to do is set up as a dealer. This is how I attack bigger shows. Now, I haven't done this that much recently because I just simply don't have the time. But this is the best way to make money because not only are you selling cards to everyday individual people, but also you're buying cards. Like if you have a booth and you're set up, people are just going to come up to you and say, hey, do you want to buy these cards or do you want to sell these cards to me? And those are the types of people you want to do deals with because dealers that set up at these shows, right, they're going to offer you cheap on cards. and they're going to sell you cards at high prices, right? Because that's simply how they make money. So setting up as a dealer at bigger shows, generally speaking, is better, but you want to be able to time it. So like you want to be able to buy cards, get them graded, use this whole timing aspect, and plan the show in advance, right? So if I know I'm going to set up at a show, and let's say right now it's January, and I know I'm going to set up at the National Card Show, which is in Chicago, I know football is going to be hot, right? Because it's the end of July or early August. So I want to be buying football in February, March, April, sending these cards in for grading, so I'm getting them back, and I can bring them to the show and use these cards to set up, okay? So that's how to attack big shows. Smaller shows, in my opinion, you want to go there as a buyer and just walk around, because these dealers, right, they're just local people. They just do cards for fun. They probably just break open boxes and cases, and those are the types of people you want to be buying cards from. But finding those people at bigger shows, probably not going to happen. So smaller shows, generally speaking, better for buying. Bigger shows, better for setting up and selling, or buying from people that come up to your booth. All right, the main thing I'm trying to get at here is you kind of want to avoid doing deals with bigger dealers, because they're sharks and they're out there to make money, which is why they're dealers, right? It's how they make their living, a lot of these people. So hopefully this makes sense. Just to recap everything, because I know I just threw a lot at you, right? Number one, breaking open boxes and cases. This is how cards come into existence. The way to make consistent money is through grading cards. Fundamentally, you could take an asset for $100, get it graded, flip it for $300, and what it takes to get a 10. This is the pieces of criteria, and this is the math behind it and why sports cards are so lucrative as a side income if you do it correctly. And this is the timing aspect. This is huge. This took me a long time to learn. It looks simple, me just putting it out there, but timing the market is huge. You can't do grading cards properly without timing the market. Scaling, 2 ways to scale. You could either hire an overseas card finder to find more cards for you on eBay while you're for less time, and also it costs you about $3 to $4 an hour, because a lot of these people live in the Philippines and that's above minimum wage. Or something I call short-term investing, where you're just basically buying higher-end cards while they're at their low point in the off-season. And lastly, just as a bonus, something I just think is high leverage, is going to sports card shows. It's a great way to scale, make money, have fun, meet people, travel, and literally get paid for it. So hopefully that kind of breaks down the sports card market in a whole. I truly do think it is an amazing way to make a side income. If you have any questions, or maybe you disagree with something I said, or maybe something is confusing, let me know in the comments below. I try to answer my comments as much as possible, or a podcast I do once a week. I try to answer the questions there. But like, comment, subscribe. See you in the next one.